I will take the roll at the other campuses. Julie in Spokane.
I'm here on the phone.
Ted in Spokane.
Here on the phone.
Naomi Chator in Spokane. Joanne, Spokane.
Here.
Glenn in Spokane.
Here.
Patricia, Spokane.
Yes, I'm here on the telephone.
And Naomi Lundstrom is here on the phone too, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm on the phone. Naomi's here.
Kay in Spokane? No. Janet in Spokane?
Janet's here on the phone.
Kelly, Spokane? No Kelly. Corey, Spokane? Ahmed, Spokane?
Yeah, here.
Lanika, Spokane?
Here on the phone.
And Ben, Tri-Cities is not here today, as I understand it. Robin in the Tri-Cities? Do we have a Robin? No Robin. John in Vancouver? No. Elizabeth, Vancouver?
Here.
Shameen, Vancouver?
I'm here.
Susan, Vancouver? No. Renee, as I understand it, is absent today. Kimber, Vancouver?
I'm here.
Nick in Yakima? No. Jennifer in Cowlitz? Cowlitz?
Yes, Jennifer and Cowlitz.
Jose in Snoqualmie? No. And Timothy in Franklin? All right, so just one thing I wanted to say to the remote campuses today. We had some kind of a fix on our microphone system, and they tell us we're not going to have to carry the microphone around anymore when we are discussing motions. But we are not yet confident that you all will be able to hear everything clearly without us carrying the microphone around. So if you can't, please alert us to this fact so we will carry the microphone, because we're going to do what it takes to make sure you hear everything. All right.
Brendan Walker from Pullman on the phone.
Yeah,
he's the
all right.
center. I've got him. Thank you.
Do we have a quorum?
We do.
Yay. Okay, I call the meeting
Susan
to.
Finley is also on the phone.
Okay. Correct that, Susan.
Robin in the Tri-Cities. I was late.
Robin, you said on Tri-Cities?
Okay, got her.
Yes, ma'am.
Very good. I call the meeting to order. And the first order of business is the approval of the February 21st minutes. Do I hear any corrections or additions to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. We move on to announcements. There are several information items there for your attention. I'm just going to mention one, which I'm also going to view as my remarks today, which will be brief, which is just that Amy, your executive secretary, will be sending out the ballots to you for you to elect your next chair-elect today, by the end of business today. Is that correct, Amy? Do I have that right?
Gail will be sending it from the listserv.
Today, Gail?
Yeah, we're hoping tomorrow. We have the special email that needs to be set up.
All right. So just to alert you to that. We have a couple of speakers today, so just, and so I think we will proceed straight into that. First, we have Brian Kraft, who wanted to tell us about the entrepreneurial faculty. Unfortunately, Brian could not be here, but is that you? Is that a photo of you, Brian, down there on my screen?
I can hear you, but your video is frozen. So
We can see you now. So I presume he should be on this back screen here. Do we have technical people who can?
This is his talk, so
Oh, I see. It would be nice to see him too, wouldn't it?
I don't know if we can do both the talk and.
All right. Well, I'm afraid Brian will be a bit of a ghost while he gives his presentation today, but I'm going to let you take it away, Brian.
okay, you guys can hear me okay though, right? Is that right? Hello?
Oh, could you swap? Could the technical people please go back to the slides? Brian wants his slides. Thank you for switching so we could see him, but back to the slides. There we go.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Okay. So I wanted to get in front of this group to talk a little bit about work I've been doing over the last number of years. Really, the broad aim is to support faculty who want to engage in some kind of outreach effort around their scholarly work. I come from a commercialization background, so I was in the tech transfer group for a couple of years. But this work started when I was working over in the College of Arts and Sciences. The kind of present status starts really with the Entrepreneurial Faculty Ambassador Group. This was a group that was formed in 2016, and the intent was to sort of create a critical mass of faculty who've engaged in this type of outreach work to sort of survey the university and understand where the problems are, where we could do better, where we could do a better job of recognizing and supporting that type of work, because pretty much everybody in this group feels like it's a really important aspect of the university. So as this group went around and started to socialize this concept, we started uncovering all kinds of problems. Some of them were administrative, but mostly it was more about communications and incentives. So as we started reporting out to the VPR, Chris Keene commissioned a review of our activities in this space. Sorry, Greg, I'm on the third slide. I'm sitting here rolling my own deck. So I'm on the slide with the innovation and entrepreneurship at WSU, the external review. So this review was commissioned late in the year in 2016. And we had a whole series of meetings, and we did a survey of faculty. That was written up over the winter of 2017. And then on the next slide, we have the ERIE recommendations came out early 2017. Broadly, in total, there were 35 recommendations. They were bucketed into roughly 3 broad areas. One was to sort of clarify and provide stronger support structures for faculty who want to engage in this activity. Do everything we could to leverage and build off of existing structures to do this, which we already had many. But most important, and this came up over and over again in the 150 plus people and in the survey data, we needed better incentives for faculty to do this type of work. That's really what I'm here to talk about today. On the next slide, this concept of incentives really stuck out in the survey data associated with the Erie review, but then it also came out in the meetings that we had. So the way the review was organized, we had meetings, I think, with 140 people at pretty much all levels of the university, everywhere from the frontline commercialization folks all the way up to the president. And I think in all but a small handful of meetings, this concept of incentives came up. The other thing that kind of was repeatedly brought up was the need for strong support and good mentoring amongst faculty. So it was really clear we needed to do something in this space. Some specifics on the recommendations. There are simple things like create an award, which we did in 2017. That's now a showcase award. And then we were also asked to form a sort of high-level commission to really explore this in detail and come back with recommendations. So what happened in 2017 after we rolled out these recommendations, President Kirk Schultz went back to the original group who pointed to the issues that were going on and asked them to lead an effort, asked this group, the Entrepreneurial Faculty Ambassadors, to lead an effort to develop some recommendations on what we can do to provide incentives. So as this group got started, it was clear, on the next slide, I'm on slide 9 now, the one that just says policy and practice. This group decided to first look at practice, because the logic being this is something we can make some clear recommendations on. We can come back and address policy at a later time. That's partly why I'm here. But the efforts starting in 2017 really put a focus on practice. Happening in parallel to this presidential commission getting formed, we started an innovation and outreach speaker series. And this was done also as a product of the external review, but part of the motivation for the series was to start meeting with department level faculty in departments across campus to start to understand what outreach and means in their discipline. So we asked departments across campus to invite a speaker who embodies an example of a faculty scholarly outreach effort appropriate for their discipline. We had them come to campus, give talks, and then we hosted dinners where we invited a few faculty in and kind of talked around what these things, what outreach means in that discipline.
Excuse me, Brian. Can you orient me
Yes.
on which slide number you're on, because you're not giving me any clues.
Sorry, Greg, I'm on slide 10 now.
Okay. Got it.
You there?
Yeah.
Okay. So going to the next slide, what came out of the Innovation and Outreach series was that there was really a lot of confusion around what it meant to sort of do outreach. The group had been the entrepreneurial faculty ambassadors. The word entrepreneurial or entrepreneurship carries all kinds of connotation with it, but when you use words like outreach, it's too fuzzy, so people didn't really know what it meant. This was actually a great precursor to the practice efforts that the EFA started looking at, because what the Innovation and Outreach speaker series triggered was a document where we created concrete examples of what outreach looks like and the value that's brought back to the university. And this involves things like, you know, course-based efforts where you are bringing resources in for students to build out projects that then get translated into use somewhere. On the next slide, one thing that became very clear is that we needed to be explicit. You know, this is about a lot more than just forming companies out of research. It's really about supporting entrepreneurial faculty who are looking to apply knowledge to benefit the public in some way. You know, if you look at the WSU mission statement, this is a core part of our mission. It's core to pretty much every land grant, yet it's not a broadly supported or recognized activity. So going to the next slide, that's slide 13. One thing that was really interesting is that in some quarters of the university, this outreach function was really well understood, specifically like over an extension, but it was understood in the context of providing sort of information services, programs in a nonprofit context. In the quarters without extension, over in CAST and engineering, the for-profit model was really well understood, but the extension-based outreach wasn't. So it's clear that we kind of had almost like a bipolar character in the university on this topic. Going to the next slide. So all of that framing sort of led to what we did over the spring through the entrepreneurial faculty ambassadors. We engaged in a series of one-on-one meetings with all of the deans across campus. And the intent there was to just kind of gather academic leadership perspective on outreach efforts, to see what we could do to find common ground around it. How can we make a set of recommendations that would sort of create best practices that would facilitate or be done in parallel with a policy change. So it was pretty encouraging when we were digesting the notes from the meetings with academic leadership. There was a real clear consensus on what needed to be in place in order for academic leadership to start to consider outreach type functions or efforts in the context of faculty promotion. The two things that really stuck out, I'm on slide 15 now, were the effort kind of needs to be contained in some way, and it needs to have some mechanism for external evaluation. By being contained, there's multiple ways that you can think about doing that. The external evaluation, that's another thing that's super important, right? Just like when you're looking at peer-reviewed papers as a metric, or externally funded proposals as a metric. There needed to be some kind of feedback mechanism. So on the next slide led to sort of the specific recommendations that we brought forward over the summer of 2018. And I have a lot of context to some of these, but pretty much it was these simple things. Put some structure around it, organize it like you would any other project. Develop external review structures, and this you could do things like alumni groups to come in and look at and review an activity. One of the ideas around how to contain it is to put some type of appointment structure around it, and then you need to train people consistently on how to use it. So I brought this to both the President's Council and the Provost's the Provost Council, and was told to go back to the academic leadership, so associate deans, and maybe some chairs and people who are experienced in these to build out some specific structures to do this in. So in doing that, on the next slide, this gets us into the fall. So last fall, what we did was Formed a working group. It was associate deans from a number of colleges, plus some individual faculty who've been involved in these types of outreach efforts, plus some key representation from folks over in Extension. What we landed on is on the next slide, was to create a couple of distinct structures that are really adaptations of things that already exist in the university. So we're not really creating anything new, we're just morphing existing things. One was to create a sabbatical for an entrepreneurial leave that people could apply for, much like you would a normal sabbatical. This would be really specific for commercial for-profit efforts. The other structure that we suggested doing was putting together temporary or partial extension appointments, or making those available to faculty across campus. And the thinking there is, extension's already a system where we're dealing with not-for-profit sort of academic outreach, and if we created something new that looked like that wasn't extension, we'd create a bunch of friction. So the idea there was let's build off extension and bring that to other quarters of the university, or at least make mechanisms for people to access it, and in parallel have this sabbatical thing. So this right now is going up the chain to the president to try and secure funding to actually implement these. So all of that said, we've made a bunch of progress. Pretty much everybody in leadership is on board with putting something together. On the next slide, this is why I'm here today. I think it's time to start looking at policies that really enable and support this. So I'm here to ask the Faculty Affairs Committee to start considering what we might do in the faculty manual to provide a structure that is more accommodating for this type of activity across the system. So that's really where I'd like to land, and I'd be more than happy to take questions or hear people's thinking on this topic.
Are there questions? Yes. Yes, and I've got my glasses over here, and you taught me how to say your first name last time. But,
Sinisha, College of Engineering and Architecture.
Senator Sinasa.
Sinisha Masarovich.
Did you say?
Don't bother. It's not easy.
Continue.
Okay, you mentioned that there is lots of confusion, and well, I can see why. I've seen this PowerPoint slides on the website. That's where my confusion began, and I'm still confused. So this did not help. First, the word outreach, where I come from, which is basically mechanical engineering, is understood as something that faculty do outside, definitely not for profit. So basically going to high schools, recruiting students, going to different social and public situations, explaining their research. It is very different from commercialization and entrepreneurship. So I've never heard word outreach used in this context. These are two very different activities, and I really don't see why should they be put together under the same policy. If you're doing commercialization for profit, why should you need to, incentivize it? There is profit there, that's incentive. Why do we need extra incentive besides profit? Then you mentioned third thing, which is bringing external funding for projects that students will be engaged for. Well, that's part of our curriculum in mechanical and materials engineering. All students do senior design projects, which are funded by industry, and faculty who teach that course bring that funding. And there is incentive there in the department in that faculty will be free from any other teaching from courses, because it is understood that requires time and and effort. So now we have three activities which are fundamentally different. I see no common point between those three. Well, commercialization, what is usually called outreach, and that is promoting in non-commercial setting WSU and its mission in the society, and bringing funding for students' projects. I see no connection between those two activities. Why are we putting them together? Why are we creating, why are we mixing apples and oranges? I see no connection there. Why should they be under the same umbrella?
So they all intersect at the point where we are leveraging expertise inside this university to show value to our public. All three of them have that common characteristic, which is really important.
Well, okay, they are also all done by the faculty. That still does not bring them under the same umbrella. I mean, take three things, three concepts, you will always find something common, right? Three human activities, I don't know, going to space, doing medicine, and I don't know, biking. They're all done by humans. They have that in common, but we think of them as well as different activities. I still see no rationale for treating three different types of activities as if they were the same. I see no common point, except that they're done by the faculty, and that they have something to do with outside of the university. But that outside is very broad. Different parts of that world outside.
So bringing our expertise to the public is a core part of our institutional mission. Those are three different ways that we do it that have no common incentive. There needs to be some coherence around this. This was the fundamental message associated with that Erie review exercise. I hear your point on there are different types of activities, and I don't disagree with that. There are different types of activities, right? And this is why one is kind of isolated over in sort of extension-like functions, another sits in a commercialization office, and a third is something that's done in course-based work. Now, what you see when you look across the university, you guys might do a lot of this in engineering, and the faculty might have a natural incentive over in engineering to do that, but the same is not true in a field like physics. So how do you create a scenario where a physics professor can have an incentive for doing this type of outreach activity, right? There needs to be a recognized organizational value for these things.
Yes, but one activity, commercial one, is already incentivized. If it's for profit, there is profit there. If you have a patent, something that can be used for profit, why should university add additional incentive? Well, I agree that for outreach faculty, we need to.
That presupposes that for-profit presupposes that there's actually going to be money generated by that invention. And the statistics on that are just simply dead wrong. Almost no inventions out of the university generate money. We hear about the ones that do, but those, I think that the numbers are about 1 in 3,000 inventions that comes out of university research ends up yielding significant money. So if, with that being your incentive, you're going to pretty rapidly diminish people's motivation to try.
So if both of you have heard what the other has to say, perhaps we could move on to any other questions the faculty may have. With that, then perhaps we will move on to our next talk, which I'm particularly looking forward to. Jennifer Ellsworth is going to be telling us about campus mental health, both of the students and of the faculty.
afternoon. Oh, that's I'm sorry to those of you on the phone. That's noisy. I'm having trouble getting the mic set up. All right. Can you hear? Is that working? All right, I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for having me here this afternoon. I'm really glad for the opportunity to meet with you all, and my purpose in coming today is to share some information about a resource that's been developed specifically for faculty in order to support some of the mental health needs of students on campus and to refer them to appropriate campus resources and to be aware of the resources that are available to you as faculty. So as I do that, I want to provide some context about mental health on campus and the context for the institution's efforts around mental health right now. Actually, I'm also going to introduce myself, and I typically co-present with Paula Adams, who couldn't be here today. My name's Jennifer Ellsworth. I'm a psychologist, and I'm the Director of Counseling and Psychological Services here on the Pullman campus. Paula Adams is the Associate Director for Health Promotion, and our offices are really active, I think, in trying to promote mental health on campus, to prevent suicide, and to bring together broad groups of people on campus to work collaboratively in this effort. At WSU, we're certainly experiencing increases in numbers of students who are coming to campus with mental health concerns and who are seeking counseling services once they get here. I anticipate that many of you are familiar with this, that you're encountering this with your students and within your departments. I think it's important to ground that in knowing that this reflects a national trend. It's not unique to Washington State University. It's something that's being experienced really nationwide. So in this first slide, I have some information about college counseling center utilization, both on the WSU Pullman campus and nationally. The Center for Collegiate Mental Health has done work across the nation and found over a 5-year period, and I believe the period that they were looking at ended in 2016 and started in 2011. They found that counseling center utilization, on average nationwide, increased by 30 to 40%, while enrollment only increased 5%. At WSU Pullman, I have the most recent information from our fall semester about the number of students who sought counseling services through our walk-ins, and found that this past fall semester 2018 compared to 5 years ago in 2013, we've experienced a 59.8% increase in students seeking counseling services through our walk-ins. I also wanted to bring some information. That previous slide, I think, captures information specific to the students who are seeking counseling services at a university counseling center. This slide has some information that's more general, that's campus-wide, and this is from the National College Health Assessment. I think it's a little bit tricky to read, but I'll sort of verbally describe some of this. There's a comparison between WSU undergrads and graduate students, and then a national sample of undergraduate students and graduate students. So there are several different domains. For example, specific experiences like feeling overwhelmed. And we can see with the pink column that national undergraduate students during the previous year, 88% of them reported feeling overwhelmed at some point during the previous year. And that exactly matches up with the number of WSU undergrads who reported feeling overwhelmed at some point during the previous year. We can see that for graduate students represented in the blue columns, nationally, 84% of graduate students felt overwhelmed. At WSU, 81% of graduate students felt overwhelmed. So you can see that the columns are pretty consistent across several different domains. It includes sort of specific instances of feeling overwhelmed or exhausted or very sad. And then I think it also captures some broader clusters, so overwhelming anxiety or depression. They're a little hard to read. Would I be able to share the slides with you to put online afterward? Okay.
Definitely. And send them to Gail. And,
Hi, Gail. Great. Yes.
Yeah, are all of these clinical categories?
No, this is based on student self-report. So the question is, from the student's perspective, did they feel overwhelmed at some point during the previous year? Did they feel depressed at some point during the previous year? We also have information about seriously considered suicide during the previous year. That's this one right here. And we can see that the numbers at WSU are fairly consistent with numbers nationally. So this timeline reflects some context for the institution in terms of efforts regarding mental health. I got here in 2015, and my understanding is that in 2014 and prior, WSU Pullman had a good counseling center, and there maybe wasn't a coordinated effort across campus to really focus on mental health. In 2015, there was more of a focus on mental health, and part of what that included was hiring 2 new positions in the health promotions unit to focus on mental health and suicide prevention. In 2015, the health promotion unit was the writers for and was awarded a Samsha Garrett Lee Smith Campus Suicide Prevention Grant. In 2016, we became a Jed Foundation campus, and in 2016, the WSU Campus Mental Health Collaborative was launched. So this reflects, I think, a constellation of efforts in 2015 and 2016 to really put some more effort into mental health promotion and suicide prevention on campus. The Mental Health Collaborative had their first meeting in 2017, and the purpose was to meet some of the goals associated with being a Jed Foundation campus program and the goals associated with the suicide prevention grant. But more broadly, it was to meet the needs of the WSU community and to achieve more mental health promotion and suicide prevention. And as a result of those resources and that effort, there is this resource that I'm here to talk about today. I'm holding a hard copy, but it's also available online, and we'll talk about that in more detail. So the Mental Health Collaborative is a group that meets once a semester, and it includes students, key student affairs staff, faculty, law enforcement, and others from across campus. And the work is really grounded in this JED comprehensive approach model. And the model really reflects that there are a number of different domains that need to be addressed on a university campus in order to promote mental health. It includes developing life skills, promoting social connectedness, identifying students who are at risk, increasing help-seeking behavior, providing mental health services, following crisis management procedures, and restricting access to potentially lethal means. I really like this model. I think it's a nice way of organizing our thoughts about all the variety of efforts that are being made on campus. So as the director of the Counseling Center here at WSU Pullman, my office is largely focused on providing mental health services, that dark blue square. That health promotion, for example, might be focused more on helping students develop life skills, or the Dean of Students office is really oriented to identifying students at risk. So using this model, it helps to think about our efforts in a coordinated, collaborative way. This data, I think, reflects some of the progress that's been made between 2016 and 2018. It's compiled using NCHA data, which is the National College Health Assessment. And there's a number of bar graphs. I'll describe one of them specifically regarding suicide prevention. In 2016, there were 47% of students who wanted information about suicide prevention, and 49% of students who reported that they received the information. In 2018, there are more students who want the information. There's 61%, but there's 72% who are reporting that they've received the information. So I think that reflects the work that's being done across campus to make students more aware of mental health resources that are available and suicide prevention specifically. So coming back to the JED comprehensive approach model, this guide for helping students in distress was developed specifically for faculty, and really I think connects with the domains of identifying students at risk, having a connection with them as faculty, and increasing their help-seeking behavior by supporting faculty in making effective referrals to other campus resources. So the guide was developed in 2017, and the goals were to support faculty and staff in recognizing potential signs of distress. And sometimes those signs are really clear, they're really obvious. A student will write something in an essay, or they'll come talk to you during office hours, and it's clear that they're experiencing mental health concerns. But there might be more subtle signs of distress. For example, a student who consistently attends, consistently turns in homework, earns good grades, and is suddenly missing class pretty regularly and not turning in assignments. That might be a more subtle sign of distress. Another goal is to support faculty in knowing enough to feel like they can effectively respond in the moment. I know that my training is in mental health, but your training is not in mental health. You're trained to be engineers or physicists or educators. So to give you enough information to feel like you have some tools available to respond in the moment. And then we also want for faculty and staff to know what the campus resources are. The expectation is not that as an engineering professor you would take on sort of a mandate to help a student navigate a mental health crisis. Really, we want you to know what the resources are that are available to support you and to support that student. So development of the toolkit included reviewing other similar toolkits from other universities, and it was also a really collaborative effort that incorporated feedback from faculty at WSU, advisors, deans, administrators, and staff. That was a really fun process to see as the drafts went out of the guide, what kind of feedback and best practice suggestions came back from faculty and some of these other groups. So the guide that's available, I think it's important to note that it's campus specific. So the resource is available online. It's at cougarhealth.wsu.edu and under the resources section. And there's specific guides for Pullman, for Everett, for Tri-Cities, for Spokane, for Vancouver. And it covers the following domains. There are guidelines for a general response, sort of generally, how might you approach this? There's also information about campus and community resources that are specific to each campus. And then there's information about specific issues, how to recognize them, warning signs of a specific issue, how you might respond to that, and where you might refer a student and where you might report the information. At this point, I'm going to see if I can navigate to the website. All right, so here's our Cougar Health Services website. And Cougar Health is located on the Pullman campus, but under resources and news, there are links to the guides for half a dozen different campuses. I'm in Pullman, we're in Pullman, so I brought hard copies that I can leave with you for anyone who's interested in having access to that resource. Since we've got the Pullman hard copies here, I'm going to look at another campus's online information. Let's look at the guide for Spokane. So for the Spokane campus, and the organization, of course, is consistent across the campuses, and it's just personalized for each one. The first area has general information for how you might respond. And I think it balances responding with compassion, believing a student and listening to a student, with staying safe, trusting your gut, and taking care of yourself. So for example, if a student seems to be at some sort of imminent risk of suicide or violence, the right answer is to call 911. It's not something that a faculty member would navigate without that support. It also encourages sharing what you know, seeking consultation, and being mindful that you can share information about a student with particular people on campus to support their health. Each of the guides also has campus resources and community resources that are specific to the campus and community where the campus is located. It typically includes counseling resources, law enforcement resources, resources related to sex and gender-based violence, and may include national resources as well. For example, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline that you might refer a student to. The rest of the guide is oriented around common issues and some specific things that might help you recognize that issue, suggestions for how you might respond, and then information about where to refer and report. And I think the idea really of the guide is knowing some people are going to be very interested in this. We show it to faculty during new faculty orientation. Some people are going to read the entire thing and really use it as a resource, and others are going to think, this is not for me, but we hope that they know where it is when they need it. So the information's organized so that hopefully when a student comes to you and they're experiencing a concern, you can pull this up and have a little bit of guidance. So for example, medical and mental health concerns is one of the rows for these, for the variety of issues. Some things that might help a person recognize that a student was experiencing a mental health or medical concern might be a direct statement. They might email you and say, here's what's going on. This is why I'm missing class. You might also notice a range of different things behaviorally. Maybe they're really fatigued and falling asleep in class. Maybe you're noticing a significant decline in appearance, behavior, or hygiene, ranging all the way down to disorganized speech, rapid or slurred speech, confusion, what they're telling you isn't making sense. There's a range of different things that might indicate a medical or mental health concern. There's suggestions for how to respond, to express concern and care. It's really useful. As faculty, you have such a close connection with students. It's really useful to use that connection and just express, I'm worried about you. Here's what I'm seeing. I'm concerned. It's important to listen and believe students' responses. And then there's information about where you might refer the student and where you might report. So a student who you think is having a mental health concern, if you can recommend that they go seek in Spokane, it would be counseling services or student health services. That's a good referral. And then there's information about who you might report the information to an academic dean or through the AWARE network. And it goes on. There are a number of topics. Hopefully compiling kind of all the information that you might want at your fingertips when you do encounter that situation. Thank you. Do you have questions? Yes.
I guess I can do this without the mic.
Sorry,
Oh, no, I was getting excited, but okay. All right, oh, wait.
Oh, yes. So I will also share my email address so that we can have additional conversation and not take too much of the faculty senate time, but we've got a few minutes.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
then
go ahead.
I have a couple questions, so I'll try to make it quickly. So, quick. I appreciate the guide, by the way. A lot of training we saw in the past costs money to attend, and that can prohibit people from providing resources we would like for students. So
Yes.
I guess a couple, my first question is, are we collecting demographics of who's using WSU services? Because the research shows that men are actually less likely to seek mental health services, especially when they're suffering from depression. Are we tracking that? Are we showing that? And is there any way, if we are, of addressing that? And I guess that's my first question. And then, well, maybe I should leave it with just that question for now. I guess my second question is also, what are the resources? Are we planning to hire more people for the counseling center? Because I know we have a lot more students using it, and it can be difficult to actually, I've referred people to the center and they tell me, they come back, I can't get in for a month. I can't get in for several weeks, and that's a significant barrier to actually using those services. So those are my two questions.
I will try to speak to them briefly, and then I'd be happy to talk more afterward. We do track demographic data. Some interesting context for us right now is that we've moved to a new electronic medical record system, and it is much harder for me to track that data as we're developing all of the reporting capacity that we need. So I don't have the information for today, but it's part of our accreditation for our doctoral internship to compare and contrast what are the demographics of students coming into the counseling center compared to the university. And we find that we actually are doing really well when it comes to men. We see a slightly greater percentage of men in the counseling center as compared to men who are on campus. So that's a positive thing. To answer the second question, it's complicated. We're constrained by resources. I will note that we've had vacancies for the past several years, and we're in the process of hiring to fill those vacancies this year. I'm optimistic that we'll fill them. The difficulty is also one that to quote sort of a well-known counseling center director, we can't staff our way out of this. So we need appropriate staffing, but we have to think creatively about how to expand capacity more broadly across campus. So that's the short answer, and I'm happy to connect with you another time. Yes.
So we're all the products of our own generational experiences, and it just seems to me, as one of the gray hairs in the room, that many people of my generation are really clueless about the pressures that our current students are under that did not exist when we were students. And it's a very, very expansive and complex subject, I know, but can you thumbnail, just to give us a little context for those of us who are baby boomers, let's say, what kind of things are our students subject to that we didn't have a clue about, and so therefore we may not be aware of when we get those students in our classroom?
There are a couple of things that come to mind. One is I think our students went through the Great Recession and experienced more economic insecurity, have watched their parents lose jobs or foreclose on homes. I think that's challenging to grow up in, and also probably really weighs heavily on them that the stakes are pretty high to do well in their educations and to be successful in pursuing careers. So that's one train of thought. Another train of thought is I'm mindful that for a baby boomer generation, there weren't the advances in treatment and medication for mental health concerns. So students who were diagnosed with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder likely wouldn't have been able to go to university or college decades ago. Now I think with the advances in treatment and medication, with support K through 12, I think it's opening doors and making college more accessible. So I think students are coming in much more commonly with treatment histories, having been hospitalized, having been diagnosed with much more significant concerns, and having had a lot of support for that K through 12. And that can shift at the university in ways that are hard to adapt to. They have to be much more proactive, I think, to access services that can support them. Is there time for any more questions, or we're done?
Just real quickly, it's actually kind of hard to find these materials on the website.
I agree.
And I think and there's a lot of commonality across the different campuses. So having like the table and the common stuff up front, because I had to click like about 4 or 5 times to get to it.
That's good feedback. Thank you. All right. Thunder, I thank you so much for letting me spend some time with you this afternoon. I will leave. Thank you.
I don't know, I'm afraid. How does she eject?
How do I check? Pull it out. Oh, just pull it out. All right, thank you so much. I will leave these for you in the back. Happy to talk with any of you. It's Jennifer.Ellsworth@wsu.edu.
So we will go straight into action items now. First is the recommendation from the Academic Affairs Committee. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting in a hurry here. Are there additions or changes to the agenda? Hearing none, we will go into the action items. First, the recommendation from the Academic Affairs Committee to approve undergraduate major change bulletin number 10. Casey Hildebrand is here and can speak to any questions. All in favor of the recommendation, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. The recommendation is approved. Recommendation number 2 from the Academic Affairs Committee to approve the proposal to extend the BA in anthropology to the global campus. Discussion, please. Hearing none. All those who approve the recommendation, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please say nay. The motion passes. Recommendation number 3 from Academic Affairs to approve the proposal to extend the BS in biology to the global campus. And Casey can answer your questions. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the recommendation, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The recommendation passes. Number 4, recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve graduate school policies and procedures. And Doug is here to answer any questions. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The recommendation passes. Recommendation number 5 from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve Graduate Major Change Bulletin number 9. And again, Doug Call can speak to your questions. Are there questions or discussion? All in favor of the recommendation, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Recommendation number, the recommendation passes. Recommendation from the Faculty Senate Steering Committee amending the Constitution to include the allowing of any parliamentarian of the Faculty Senate in the last 4 years to be eligible to run for the position of chair-elect. And I think any of us on the executive committee can address any questions you may have. Is there any discussion or questions? All in favor of the recommendation, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The recommendation passes. Last, number 7, the recommendation from the Faculty Steering Committee to approve the degree pathway to include a fast track option. And so Greg can speak to this. Are there any questions or discussion? All in favor of the recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The recommendation passes. We now move on to discussion items. First, the recommendation from Academic Affairs to approve undergraduate major change bulletin number 11. And Casey can answer your questions. Are there any questions or discussion? All of these will, of course, move to action items next time. Next, the recommendation from Academic Affairs to approve the proposal to extend the BA in English to the global campus. Sorry, so Greg, you're saying you can't hear me? That's better? Okay. Okay, again, recommendation from Academic Affairs to approve the proposal to extend the BA in English to the global campus. And Casey can address your questions. Are there any questions or any discussion? Very good. Recommendation number 3 from Academic Affairs to approve the proposal to create a new degree, BA in Human Biology. And Casey can answer your questions. Any questions or discussion? Next, the recommendation from Academic Affairs to approve the revision of Rule 110, undergraduate university requirements for graduation. Casey can answer your questions. Are there any questions or any discussion? Next, recommendation number 5 from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the revised plan on the Pharmaceutical Sciences PhD. And Doug Call can answer your questions. Any questions or discussion? Next, the recommendation number 6 from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the revised plan on the Veterinary Science PhD. Doug Call can answer your questions. Any questions or discussion? Next, recommendation number 7 from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the revised plan on nutrition and exercise physiology and the coordinated program in dietetics, MD. Doug Call can answer your questions. Next, recommendation number 8 from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the new graduate certificate in environment. Is there any discussion or any questions? Next, recommendation number 9 from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve Graduate Major Change Bulletin number 10. Any questions or discussion? Recommendation number 10 from the Professional Health Sciences Committee to approve the proposal to revise the grading basis for the College of Pharmacy. And John can answer any questions you may have. And last, the recommendation to approve the Professional Health Sciences Major Change Bulletin number 3. And again, John Mattoon can answer any questions. All right. We then move on to constituent concerns. And again, my sense is somehow the website is working so well that we're getting less of them, but still, please, if you have any, this is your moment. Any constituent concerns? In that case, I wish you all a most relaxing and pleasurable break. And the meeting is adjourned.